Yeah.
If you don't then you
It's fun. And when you have, kids, you have...
They call it reality TV. But what Elizabeth just pulled was psychological warfare disguised as friendship. Some people enter a room and raise the energy. Others drain it dry, leaving behind a lingering odor of resentment and cheap perfume. Elizabeth, ever the patron saint of passive aggression, has perfected the latter. Watching her manipulate her way through friendships feels less like reality television and more like a cautionary documentary on what happens when emotional immaturity meets camera time. At the center of her latest performance lies a betrayal so deliberate it borders on cinematic. Loren, in a moment of vulnerability, confided private feelings to Elizabeth, who, rather than guard that trust, decided to weaponize it. She handed the private exchange over to her husband like a toddler showing off stolen candy, allowing him to read the messages. When confronted, Elizabeth's instinct was not remorse, but retaliation. Her solution: inflict equal or greater emotional pain by tattling to Yara that Loren had supposedly mocked her. This was not a misstep. It was strategy. Elizabeth is a woman who spreads hurt the way others spread moisturizer, daily and without reflection. In the name of honesty, she sows chaos. In the name of friendship, she tests the tensile strength of loyalty until it snaps. When she betrayed Loren, she wasn't merely disclosing gossip. She was detonating a bomb, hoping the blast radius would take down both Loren and Yara's budding friendship. The scene was textbook Mean Girl 101. Elizabeth, feeling displaced from the emotional spotlight and excluded from the camaraderie forming between Yara and Loren, reverted to the only social survival skill she's ever known: sabotage. If she can't be the most beloved, she'll settle for being the most talked about. And if she has to torch a few relationships to maintain relevance, well, collateral damage builds character. Or ratings. Her manipulation of the Miami comment was especially telling. Loren's description of Yara as so Miami was a benign observation, almost affectionate. Yara's entire brand is a curated blend of designer clothes, glossy veneers, and unapologetic glamour. So Miami fits like a perfectly tailored cocktail dress, but Elizabeth twisted it into an insult, spinning a compliment into cruelty, knowing Yara would take offense. It's a sleight of hand that reveals both her insecurity and her craftiness. She wanted a fight, not resolution, and she got exactly that. It's ironic that Elizabeth claims to value drama-free friendships. This is the same woman whose family has been in open warfare for several television seasons. She's estranged from half her siblings, has turned marital conflict into a professional skill, and now carries her dysfunction into every new social circle like an heirloom she refuses to leave at home. Her husband Andre, an embodiment of Eastern European machismo with the emotional range of a traffic cone, doesn't help matters. Together, they form a two-person echo chamber of control, resentment, and performative victimhood. There's a particular cruelty in Elizabeth's demeanor, a cold satisfaction when she wounds someone and then feigns confusion about the fallout. She calls it honesty. Everyone else calls it spite. Her expressionless, tight-lipped smile and perpetual defensiveness make it clear that empathy is a foreign concept. She's less friend, more HR complaint waiting to happen. Some defenders argue that Elizabeth's upbringing excuses her behavior, that growing up in a family of combative siblings bred her into this hostility. Perhaps, but adulthood offers choices. Many survivors of toxic environments learn to evolve. Elizabeth, by contrast, has turned dysfunction into identity. She reenacts her childhood battles with anyone unlucky enough to enter her orbit, slinging emotional barbs under the guise of truth-telling. It's a pattern so entrenched that one almost expects her to hand out participation trophies for trauma. Andre's influence has only amplified her worst tendencies. Their marriage is a masterclass in mutual enablers. He bullies the outside world, and she defends him with missionary zeal. The pair thrives on conflict because it gives them purpose and airtime. Her loyalty to him, once pitiable, has morphed into complicity. The woman who once seemed timid now mirrors his aggression, deploying manipulation instead of muscle. One of the more disturbing revelations was Elizabeth's casual mention that Andre reads her private communications. Some might dismiss it as standard marital transparency. Others recognize it for what it is, controlling and invasive. Either way, it underscores the unhealthy dynamic at play. Trust is not Elizabeth's language, surveillance is. No one should ever text her anything remotely personal again, unless they want Andre to proofread it. The irony of her self-righteousness would be delicious if it weren't so exhausting. Elizabeth's favorite narrative is that everyone else is dramatic, while she merely reacts. Yet every mess she touches bears her fingerprints. She's the link between every feud, every confession gone public, every whispered slight that explodes into a headline. Even when she apologizes, her contrition feels less like remorse and more like PR. Perhaps that's why she clings so tightly to her husband and so loosely to friends. Real intimacy requires accountability, something Elizabeth seems allergic to. Instead, she crafts alliances like chess moves, measuring who will make her look sympathetic and who can be sacrificed for the plot. Her sisterly feuds provided cover for years, making her look relatively sane by comparison. But stripped of that backdrop, her unfiltered personality now gleams in all its petty, graceless glory. There's also an unmistakable jealousy lurking beneath her concern. Elizabeth resents the confidence and autonomy that women like Zara and Loren display, qualities she suppresses in herself to appease Andre. Watching other women build camaraderie or express independence seems to ignite in her a desperate need to reassert control. Hence the betrayal. Destroying their bond allows her to feel superior again, even if only by default. Her attempts to pit Zara and Loren against each other weren't spontaneous. They were calculated. She arrived late to their trip, brimming with envy that the two had already formed a rapport. In classic mean girl fashion, she corrected this perceived imbalance by injecting poison into the conversation. She made sure Zara knew that Loren had supposedly mocked her, ensuring that trust would evaporate faster than the tequila they were sipping. The brilliance of her cruelty lies in its plausible deniability. She always couches her venom in concern. The hypocrisy is staggering. Elizabeth claims to value loyalty, yet she betrayed a friend's confidences. She claims to despise drama, yet manufactures it with industrial efficiency. She preaches kindness, yet speaks with the calculated cruelty of someone who studies people's insecurities just to weaponize them later. Andre, for his part, looms behind her like a brick wall in a turtleneck, bullying anyone who questions their morality while Elizabeth polishes her halo. He is the hammer to her scalpel. Together, they dismantle relationships with both brute force and surgical precision. That the two believe themselves to be the most real couple on reality TV would be hilarious if it weren't such a bleak reflection of self-delusion. Even Elizabeth's defenders must admit her sense of entitlement is breathtaking. She walks into situations as though the laws of decency do not apply to her. Her drop-in visit to Zara and Jovi, tequila bottle in hand, was less social call than territorial incursion. When her attempt at bonding was rebuffed, she retaliated by smearing Loren. The woman treats human connection like a pyramid scheme, always recruiting, always exploiting, never sustaining. It's difficult to determine whether her toxicity is born of insecurity or strategy. Perhaps both. She seems threatened by any dynamic that doesn't orbit her. Yet she's self-aware enough to know that stirring the pot guarantees her relevance. After all, without conflict, Elizabeth and Andre fade into beige anonymity. The show may call it reality TV. Elizabeth calls it survival. There's also an air of projection in her cruelty. Elizabeth accuses Loren of jealousy while seething with it herself. She brands others as dramatic, while staging emotional ambushes for sport. She lectures about honesty while lying through omission and implication. The contradiction would almost be admirable if it weren't so tedious. What makes her particularly detestable is that she's not content simply to win an argument. She must humiliate. When confronted, she doesn't defend her actions so much as rewrite the narrative to make her cruelty seem justified. It's the kind of gaslighting that would make Machiavelli blush. Even viewers accustomed to reality television's pantomime of morality find Elizabeth's behavior unsettling. She lacks the campy self-awareness that makes most villains bearable. Instead, she radiates the genuine malice of someone who enjoys watching people squirm. Her scenes are less entertaining than claustrophobic, a study in emotional suffocation. And yet, the true tragedy is that Elizabeth believes she's the victim. She imagines herself misunderstood, besieged by jealous women and unfair editing. But no amount of selective editing can fabricate this much venom. Cameras don't make people betray confidences, they merely record it. Perhaps her family dynamic offers clues. The Pothass clan, perpetually bickering, entitled, and self-absorbed, seems to treat dysfunction as a family crest. Elizabeth's siblings barely tolerate her, and with good reason. She's the sibling who brings a knife to a pillow fight, then cries foul when someone bleeds. Her inability to maintain any stable relationship outside her marriage isn't coincidence, it's consequence. One could almost pity her if she weren't so relentlessly unpleasant. She's clearly trapped in a cycle of control, controlled by her husband, desperate to control others. Her empathy has atrophied, replaced by a reflexive need to wound first, lest she be wounded. That doesn't excuse her behavior, but it does explain its persistence. Still, pity only stretches so far. At some point, accountability must enter the conversation. Elizabeth is not a misunderstood anti-hero. She's a grown woman who weaponizes secrets, manipulates friends, and mistakes cruelty for confidence. Her moral compass isn't broken. It's calibrated to point exclusively towards self-interest. The saddest part? She's so desperate for approval that she's willing to torch every relationship she touches just to feel momentarily important. But relevance built on betrayal is fleeting. Today's villain may trend, tomorrow's pariah is forgotten. If there's any justice in the universe of reality television, Elizabeth and Andre will eventually fade into the sunset they've earned, one lined with resentment, tequila, and the echo of bridges burning behind them. Until then, every episode featuring them remains a grim masterclass in how not to be a friend, a spouse, or a human being. Because for all her protestations, Elizabeth isn't misunderstood. She's perfectly clear. And that's the problem.